People ask sometimes, is it different growing up in a preacher's kid home? And I'm thinking, different than what? That's all I know. I mean, I guess being a deacon kid, your dad might say, hey boy, I want that grass cut today. I guess that's how they would say it, but not my dad. No, not with his preacher voice. It'd be something like, so when I come home, thou shalt put the hand on the handle of the mower, thou shalt pull once.
See, I became a Christian in 4th grade. Now, by the way, if you become a Christian in 4th grade, you know God a long time, but it makes for real boring testimony.
Well, I used to be King James only. By the grace of God, I'll never, ever back off on the King James Bible and the defense of it. And you will see the fact that a book like this, a perversion like this, the NIV, actually does remove verses.
That's the problem with becoming a Christian when you're just a little kid. You have no cool testimony. How I longed for the testimonies I used to see go up in my church. Yes, I used to be addicted to heroin and the Lord freed me. And I'd be like, oh, if I was addicted to heroin.
A Homestead High School wrestler is recovering after suffering severe neck and back injuries in a weekend match.
His coach tells us Go-Go's was thrown to the mat in an illegal move, and that's when he broke a vertebrae in his neck.
Coach Nathan DeVoe feared his wrestler was paralyzed, while teammates huddled in prayer.
Because the brain and its nerve cells are so fragile, sudden, rapid movements of the head can cause injuries. In high-speed coup-contra-coup injuries, the impact may be violent enough to cause swelling and bruising of the brain tissue, called a contusion.
Put a helmet on!
For some people, it is perfectly acceptable to manipulate others. It's almost a lifestyle. So how do we protect ourselves against people like that?
They're good at putting you on the defensive. They may come up with a rationalization for their behavior that just sounds so wonderful. Makes you feel like the bad guy for confronting them on something. They know that if they can get around your resistance, they're halfway home. So they don't want you to see that they're on the aggressive.
But they're afraid to do the right thing. Because they're phonies when it comes down to it. Isn't that what a manipulator is?
That is correct.
Phony.
That is correct. A manipulative person is basically, as I call in my book, a covertly aggressive personality. They want to get the better of you, but they don't want to be seen as doing that.
Right.
What we need to know is what makes them tick. What are the tactics that they're going to use on us? How do we respond to these tactics? How do we assert ourselves?
That is a great testimony!
There are 200 men standing in our studio audience right now. Each one is holding a picture of themselves at the age when they say they were first sexually abused. What happened to them as young boys has profoundly affected who they have become as men.
I was a prostitute and the Lord freed me. Oh, I could have done that! I was 9! I had to, invent some complex testimony. Yes, I used to have difficulty with long division, and the Lord freed me from my mathematical shackles.
And you show in the kill shot, Kennedy is going back and to the left, very clearly. The shot has to come from the front because he reacts. He goes back. And now they've put scientific coding on it and called it all kinds of things, but that doesn't work. Nor does the magic bullet, the single bullet that wounds Connolly and Kennedy 7 times. It doesn't work at all. It's a ridiculous bullet. When you take those 2 incidents alone, plus the autopsy of Kennedy, which is bizarre because most of the witnesses saw a huge exit wound on the back of his right skull. Huge. They described the cerebellum falling through the skull in the Parkland Hospital. And later on, when it gets to Bethesda and the illegal autopsy is done, controlled by the military, the back of the head is repatched. And all the photos since then have been and the people who actually saw the head go and they look at the photo and say, that was not the head that I saw. So it's a bizarre story, but those call them 3 major points.
You are tuned in to God's Property Radio. Here are your hosts, Sam and Dan.
I go by Sam, and welcome to God's Property Radio, episode number 10. We are now into the double digits, which is very exciting for us in our small existence as a podcast thus far. This episode is entirely dedicated to Daniel's testimony. So I will be doing the intro without him, and I will be doing the outro without him, and that will happen on the next episode for him doing my testimony, because we felt it to be a bit strange to have to introduce ourselves as the guest, and I think you could understand that. And so it was decided that we would not do that. So Daniel has had to go through a lot of different challenges in his life that I think, at least myself, when I hear some of the stories he's been through, I thank the Lord that I haven't had to go through some of those things. And I definitely think that people can learn from Daniel's testimony. One thing I do want to disclaim before we get into the interview here is that we mentioned that when we got married, we felt like we became real men. And that isn't to say that there are not real men that are not married. Many of the people that we're friends with are real men, but we just didn't want it to come off that way. So please bear with us. We just felt that, at least for us, maybe that just means we weren't man enough, and we needed a woman to help us grow up in some ways that other men don't need a woman to help them grow up. So just to disclaim that. So I'm not going to make this a long intro. I will sum up my thoughts at the end of the interview a little bit, and I will also mention just a few cool things that have gone on for us with the podcast lately, and talk about some guests that we're going to have on in the future as well. So everybody sit back and enjoy Daniel's testimony, episode number 10, Confessions of a Deacon's Kid. Here we go.
This discussion is under the blood covenant of Yahshua, explicitly without prejudice and under reserve.
Well, to start off, I was conceived. First 9 months were pretty boring. Then I came out of the womb, smacked my butt, hit me up with some injections, and then my dad paraded me down the halls, telling everyone in a very loud voice, "This is my son." 16 years later, he regretted his pride. No, anyway. No, yeah. Okay, seriously. I was born into a Christian home. Both my parents were Christians at the time. Obviously, they still are. My dad did not grow up in a Christian home, but he had gone to Penn State and then attended about a year of Bible college at Practical Bible Training College, which is now Davis College in Binghamton, New York. And my mom, she attended the full 3-year Bible degree there and graduated. Ironically, that is not where they met. My parents met at church, and then it all started when my mom got a flat tire, and my dad was driving by, and he fixed it for her.
Nice.
So that's the beginning of my parents' story.
Suave.
And then,
Suave, Mr. Gao.
Oh, not my dad. But anyway, so yeah, and then, they dated, got married. I came along about a year and a half later. Bada bing, bada boom, there I was. Okay, so growing up, I grew up in the Baptist church, not KJV only Baptist churches, but I did.
Got to clarify.
I did grow up in the Baptist church, mainly Independent Baptist. For those of you who really know your denominations, you'll understand the difference between a GRBC or an Independent Baptist or a Southern Baptist or a KJV only, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So many sub-denominations within a denomination of the sub-denomination of Protestantism itself. That is not the correct word. Anyway, I am rambling. So, my mom was a Sunday school teacher. My dad was a deacon. My home church, the pastor kids were all grown up. And my sisters and I were the only Deacon's kids. So for all you PKs out there, I share in the pressure that you felt, because since all of the pastor kids were grown and none of them were living at home at the time with their families, all the heat was on me and my two sisters. And it was kind of like, awesome. I mean, I remember please, I was 8, okay? I was running around with my friends in the church, and I was running up the stairs. I remember this old gentleman who's still alive today. He's a nice guy, but he grabbed me by my shoulders. He picked me up and said, it shook me, "You shouldn't be running in the church. It's disgraceful. You should know better to act that way. You're a deacon's kid." I'm sorry, sir. So, yeah, that was my life growing up. If you were a PK or a DK or any of those things, you understand you are not as perfect as everyone likes to think you are or wants you to be. My parents didn't really expect that from us. My mom did. I up until about the time I was 10 years old and things started to change for my mom. My mom she's grown a lot since then, but she was very much a perfectionist the first 10 years of my life. I learned to clean a bedroom by going in, cleaning it spotless. And my grandfather was in the Air Force, and when my mom grew up, he did white glove inspections every week, and she did the same thing to us. She would come in, run her white glove along the brim of the window trim, the door trim, on the door. She found dust, wiped the whole room down again.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Isn't that called OCD?
We're military, I guess. We gotta break it into the infantry. A little wordplay.
Yeah, there you go.
Shout out to a Leonard Ulrich interview there, with Rob Skiba. Anyway, but yeah, so that was life growing up until about 10 years old. Life was pretty normal for a kid. I lost my uncle when I was 5 years old to stomach cancer. His eldest daughter was 4 days older than I, so my cousin and I, we were pretty close back then. And when my aunt remarried, there started to become a rift kind of between the two of us at that point. She really kind of started to walk a different path to this day. However, she is in the National Guard, and I give her props for that, and I thank her for her willingness to serve. My cousin, she'll come back into the story later. So anyway, 10 years old, we come to the point where we move to a new school district. We transfer. It was the school that my dad graduated from high school. I had started wrestling at this time. I started wrestling in 4th grade the year before in the previous school. But in 5th grade, I came over here and wrestled for the next 2 years. Again, I'm just really being a normal kid at this point in life. When I turned 12, my family would go to a Christian family camp every year up in the Adirondacks. I will say this is where I went to school, was the Word of Life Bible Institute, and we would go to the Word of Life Family Campground up there every year. And, oh, hey, everyone probably wants to know when I got saved. That's a good one. So, sorry, and it'll probably become more clear as to why I kind of glance over that part of it, because God bringing you to the point of salvation is a process, and to the realization of what that means. Okay, so let's backtrack real quick here. I was 6 years old, and my cousin Colleen, when we were 5, shortly after her dad died, that spring before we turned 6, we were sitting out on our swings at my house, or my parents' house, and she goes, "Dan, do you know what hell is?" And she starts talking to me and says, "Dan, you got to go to heaven. You need Jesus. You're going to go to hell." And she starts describing. You have to understand something. My cousin, very descriptive person, very artistic mind, very creative, and even from a young age, she could paint a very vivid picture. So
talent.
That she painted this really vivid picture of hell in my mind, and how horrible it was going to be, and how she wasn't going there and her dad wasn't there, but if I didn't have Jesus, I was going there. And she kind of seemed happy about it. But that was part of her descriptive kind of thing. So I think she was trying to evangelize. And well, for the next couple of months, it really bothered me. And then the day before my birthday, she really gets on my case about it again, where again, we're playing in the backyard this time. Some imaginary, I think we were pretending to be dogs or something. We played those imaginary games as kids. And then somehow we got on the topic of hell again, and it really freaked me out. Well, the next morning on my birthday, I don't come downstairs to get my presents. My parents come up and like, "Hey, do you want them? Your dad's got to go to work." And I'm like, "No, it's okay. I'll come down later." So I don't leave my room until like 10 o'clock that night. And I'm up in my room, I'm bawling. I'm terrified that I'm going to die. I had this dream the night before that I died and I went to hell, and hell was my parents' house with huge Tyrannosaurus Rex running outside while being trapped by a fire. And, that may seem ridiculous, but to a little kid, it was terrifying.
Sure.
And the next morning, my mom finally comes up. She's cleaning the upstairs, moving on with it. She's like, "What's wrong, honey?" And I told her, and I'm like, "I don't want to go to hell." And, and Colleen, or my cousin, she told me all this stuff, and she explained to me how I could come to know Christ. So